Alright, 이렇게 마한주 밀리아 남주 야고 쉬우치 베지다 요레스 지사 디네자 치 튀게 오버 열기치다 근스 조바나 신아주 난게 셈들레 니 냠도 야게 땅도 같이 고고레스 지사 당아주 지용업의 튕긴디게 근스 야가 질레 베지 땅그디에 간 누가 질레 베지 땅그디에 나군노라 라리고레스 디엔자 마주야 잼제게 삼노디 아니 셴레 펜베 삼보디 한 지야게 땅도바이나 한 지가 저기 지용오버 얘기도 받쳐서 셴레 펜바다 라신니가레 펜베자를 툭툭 그래스 니메바체 아니 셴레 지게 채와당 초외 삼비가 군내라바이나 당 지용오버 튕긴디게 라신니가레 뇌발레 베제 따제 아주 미타 밀리아 린낭 메발라도 고레스 대자당도 잠제디 아니 냠내지 고레스 하디다 가사나 디리 쇼게로 슈베티네레.
Good afternoon. This morning we looked at how this remarkable human intelligence we have, it has brought about this tremendous material developments in our world. But how we use all these goods that have been developed is dependent on our intention. And if our motivation is infused with love and compassion, then we'll use material goods in a way that brings benefit to others and ourselves. However, if one's attitude is dominated by being self-centered, or in particular if this is expressed through anger, then we'll utilize the material wonders of this world in a way that only harms.
어디네 자다가 저기 잠니제 장수 셈세디 다 benenga 저기 남바상이 비기 취유조디 장수 셈냠는 제래 장수 셈냠는 제베토네 아니 어두스네 제고 그래스 디엔자다 장수 셈 주베기 탑람데라 아니 네 곰잡산데라 니요레스 다신냠 지고는 주스다 근데 아니 지명아 죽세디도네 장수 니요레스 디네现在랑 저게 저게 Gunimanga doing Rimbati and Rimbatinishi Shusarwada.
Thereafter, His Holiness presented how to develop love and compassion, in particular to the point where one generates bodhicitta, and he presented that there are two methods, one being that of equalizing and exchanging self with others, and the other being the 6 cause and 1 effect method. And this morning, we also looked at an overview of the 6 cause and 1 effect method.
Adinezada Jundi Menga Dungone and Nazulo Jamba Tela and Damboanzuki, Kiawangachidi, and some Tangures, Cesadineza, Kiawangachidi, some Tangures in Shuro, that Karesine, Kiawangachi, some Tango over the Kumja Karesine, and Semjan Tamje, and Rangi Machi, Nyoares, and some Tangudi, and Kiawangama, some Matavana, Sedila, some Dana, Rangamachi, Madu Marwa. Semjanam Rangema Marua. Tis not in it, Machi, no, some Tadu, Kiawangama, Kiawa Drangme, but to Shin, some Tango already. That Kiawangama, the Chimadi, some Tango became Zeruti Chagore.
And as His Holiness said in the text, that if one reflects on the second method, the 6 cause and 1 effect method, one has to have an understanding of rebirth, of reincarnation. And this is because the very first of the 6 causes is that of reflecting on the close and intimate relationship we have with all beings, in particular that of mother and child. And if we don't look back beyond this life, we'll only be able to identify one person with whom we have that relationship. So therefore, one has to reflect on previous lives in the context of 6 cause and 1 effect method. Returning to the text on page 2, just below the list of the 6 causes and the 1 effect, To do this meditation, it is necessary to know about the process of rebirth. The final reason showing that there is rebirth is that your consciousness, being an entity of mere luminosity and knowing, must be produced from a former moment of consciousness, from a former entity of luminosity and knowing.
Zanda gomjayo do dambo kiawanga chi shewe do da kiawanga chi di kiawanga ma dan chima jinge ba do haku gore da haku go nanda kiawanga ma dan chime yubi gyumzen gare sa ji da gyumzen tardu ba de gare sa de gyumzen ji go go ba da gyumzen tardu de gare sa diwar chili go ba de gyumzen tardu ba ni sa de.
Yeah, His Holiness is presenting how in the end one can establish reincarnation.
Kiawangama yubi gyumzen tardu ba de gare ganestin du go rasne shebe den du go resne sheba khoron ane sashin ribare rigbe chachi re sangazu gila anzu sukda sheba ni che yawa ni che ta nange sheba sadi ane ngo gane shiresen sashin rigbe cha zamshi re se di re se sashin imbe se sheba ne sashin rigbe cha zamshi imbe se de chisan sheba sadi sashin rigbe ki cha zamshi re se.
And the way that in the end one can establish a reincarnation, that past lives and future lives, is by looking at consciousness, not at form, but looking at consciousness. So consciousness is defined as being clear and knowing, or as it's translated in our text, luminosity and knowing.
지난다 사신 리비기 차디 셰바티야 아니 고তেওঁ 규지를 깨진감이기 규지를 때네 기고골마도 공어보인자 기진감마치를 때네 기고골 와서 다디네게 사신 리비 모전기 셰바 기진감마실이 기고스 그래서 제부인자 그 규지를 때네 기고골에 제상 규지 때네도 셰바 사신 리바데 그런 기진감마치를 때네 기고골에 인지미 기고골에 해지래.
Consciousness, being impermanent, means that each moment is a result that has come from a cause, and that cause would be a previous moment of consciousness. So as we see in the text, must be produced from a former moment of consciousness. So each single moment of consciousness has come from a cause, and that cause was a previous moment of consciousness.
셰바 기징아마질에 끼워서나 수기 녀렌 제베게 셰바 끼미시세 제선다 셰바디 아주 셰바디 기징아마질에 끼고바이자 디 기징아마지 수지 샤제 수지 녀렌 제네 셰바디 끼그리베선 디게요 말레스 제선다 셰바 끼기 기징아마디야 신짐치 셰바 징고레서 셰바지마도 셰바 마이버 숙제 수지기 수기 녀렌 제네 셰바디 끼와 용고 말에 스키미시스.
Furthermore, it is not possible for consciousness to be produced from matter as its substantial cause. So consciousness cannot arise from form or from matter.
디네자 다 셰바디 기징아마 실리 기고베딘 시비 균라 토마샤미둡세데 제상 셰바디 기징아마질레디네 기워서 셰비게 기징아마디앙 아마딜레딘 디네 기징아마 셰바딜 제상 두야 지버 제바 심주체 조베네 셰바디 기징아메 균디 토마디네 주마레 디강을 녀를 요 말에서네 토미게 토샤 균 토마디 샤투야 마샤요 말에서.
Once consciousness is produced from a former moment of consciousness, a beginning to the continuum of consciousness cannot be established. So here one analyzes and recognizes that a present moment of consciousness would have resulted from a preceding cause, which would have been a preceding moment of consciousness, and it could only have been consciousness, not form or matter. And that preceding moment of consciousness, it itself would have come from a preceding moment of consciousness, which it itself would also have come from a preceding moment of consciousness. And in this way, we can see that consciousness is continuously, each moment of consciousness has been continuously produced from a preceding moment, which cannot be found to have a beginning. Therefore, a continuum of consciousness is beginningless, in that no beginning can be found.
Dedarna, dine inzadane, Jidangi, Shebi, Rik Tasho della, Tomada, Tama Mejin, della dine Gewanga Juba Juba, Drup said it. Dine, the Sheba la Toma Shatu Mevanza, Nisheba Tasho della, Giji, Tomayan, Didides, and Toma Dinema, the Diniel Yomaras, Tommy Tayan Shatu Yomare. And that in ma Dibadu Dinazos and then Yomares and Tametaya Yomares, just a Sheba Tramotilla, Tommy Tada, Tame Tasia, Nigan Mevare, Meva in Zada, Della Dine Zada, Yawangashi Yobadi, Denis Tugu or Ejida.
The paragraph concludes, in this way, the general and most subtle type of consciousness has no beginning and no end. From this, rebirth is established. So it's through this logical reasoning that one establishes beginningless rebirth, in that consciousness does not, or the continuum of consciousness does not have a beginning.
Oh, Dinige, that's some Sheba dele, Dine some Tande Kiawanga Mada Chima, you to create that to be ores some dus riba Jeba Dinichi or res Sungorva, Dinizinigan Danganzuke, Semlia, Seburachik, Dwenjiruchi, Chaya, Semlia, Seburuch, Dwenjiru, Chaya, the Yunguduese. And that is
So this is the logical reasoning, and therefore one asks of oneself, does a mental image or meaning generality of beginningless rebirth appear to your mind?
당한테 do something sheba chilia getting your Kiawanga said to you to Danganzo Sheba sometime Danganzo Dumdero sometime Chisada Sheba le Nikorongi Sheba Dian Gudan Kinchile Dine Gigore, Koron Gu Yeling Gudi, Sheba Jimato, Sheba Maimo Sujenjigi Yeling to go Mares, in Jimmy Sheba Shin Gures and the Son Sodem.
A way to think about this that is easy to understand is that a moment of consciousness had to have come from a cause, and that cause would have been a previous moment, and that previous moment would have had to have been consciousness. It couldn't be a form or matter. It has to have been consciousness. Therefore, a particular instant or moment of consciousness needed to arise from a preceding moment of consciousness.
Tadangbo, the Midicanis, Amigi, Kiadu, then those Amichilo, my case, and the Budi Kiasons like one. That was in Amike, Budi, do some that my Guinea Kawaras and Amidogonal Wada, to Ya Jebashitogua. The Amidogonal Yobadi, those and Dawakara Zivena, that Daogu, Robe Budi, Chamboche. Dawa ye doye bu chunga che dinya la dawa dun tuk dun den dawa chik nen dawa chik le zin yo de ne sha wo sum ji tan ba jisa da ngal ya bu dang bo cha ya gi cha be gi dang bo ngal ya ami gi ji ge dang bo cha yo de di dang bo nga so su bul ma so na din dang bo de li yo wa su ami gi de le ya da bene ju zero ma so chung ji ma de yo ma wa da. So
what we can readily recognize is our current state and how we've transformed or grown throughout this life, and that there was a point when we were born from our mother's womb. So in that moment, when we physically entered into this world, separated from her body, in the moments preceding that, we were within her body, where we had been for a period of 9 months. And over that period, from just before our birth to a month before, and another month before that, and another month before that, our body was growing and developing, right back to the very first moment of conception.
Pamegi Dutenda, Palagi Duteni, so Dambo so, Dudangan to Subudi Mason, Dambo Joa. 제가 데네게 당보 루병도 디기 두된 숙디 나올어야 넘버 쉐바지 당보 슈고다 디 넘버 쉐바 당보들이 디 넘버 쉐바디 간주기 디 넘버 쉐바디 규디 녀랭 규디 가와였으나 파메기 두텐의 용화레베스나 바베기 두텐레베스나 말해 아메 두텐레베스나 말해 다디 샹기 냐마친 용고래 다디 가서 수디 당보 주야자 디나로 수디나 두텐이 딘 수디 나로 넘버 쉐바 슈바 당보 인자 디 마슈비니라 코 기징아마네 가와요래 라면도 다디 바르도와 세디 용고래 바르도와 세디 고레스 바르도와 세디 데네게 삼다데 딘데 바르도이 쉐바데 가와요르스네 기징아마 시로지 현데 어디 기징아마 미지 그 가리나 찍고 욱체로 제지어로 어디 가요래 해서 지도 두 삼다도 깨왕아마데 두고래
At very first moment of conception, where did our body come from? Well, it would have come from our father's sperm, our mother's egg, uniting. So that was the lineage from which our body came, our material form. But what about the consciousness that was present in that first moment of the fertilized egg? Did that come from our father or from our mother? So it certainly did not come from their form, rather, because it's consciousness. Rather, it would have come from a previous moment of consciousness, a particular continuum, which would have been in the bardo. So the moment before the consciousness entered the fertilized egg, that consciousness, that in the preceding moment, would have been in the bardo. And where was that consciousness before it was in the bardo? Well, some moments before, maybe many moments before, it would have been in another life form. That life form ended, the last breath was taken, and the consciousness moved in the next moment to the intermediate state. And from the intermediate state, it eventually, progressing moment by moment, the consciousness entered into a fertilized egg.
Dene nganzo tangpo nganzo ame ngane chabe nyakapsu nganzo sheba tuyadi tadi kichi tangpo de kawa yore sidi kichi ngama da bardo wachi la sha bardo wachi dene ke bardo yuki sheba di kichi ngama de kawa yore la du kyawa ngama ki da semche mi nada mi chimbe ngane mi shiro chimbe na kyawa ngama mi shiro chi mi di kyu la sha dene ke da namba sheba di diya ane karire sine di number sheba de mi de gewangame meeting number sheba dia dade samdan hana jinjin amegi ma jinjin duchen jibijiya dade samdan jibijiya joro wada jide dusu jebena jisan gewang amegi ngazo sheba dila ngama jebana di bardo yore dini gangla yo maresne tartu bade yo maresa ji disi urda.
In this way, we can follow the continuum of consciousness, moment by moment, back throughout this life, into the womb, to the point of entry to the womb, into the preceding intermediate state, and into the life before that. So let's say in the life before this, one was a human being. When that life ended, in the next moment, the consciousness moved to the intermediate state, where it abided, moment by moment, the consciousness abiding, until it entered into this new human life. And so if we continue in this reverse process into our previous life to this, say, that human life, then consciousness would have progressed moment by moment, from a preceding moment to a later moment. And we could go back throughout the continuity of our entire life previous to this, and to the period into the womb, and before that in the intermediate state, and before that into the life previous to that. So in other words, 2 lifetimes ago. And in this way, one can go back and back and back, and will never be able to find a beginning to consciousness.
다 되네서 다 제가 치마 마도 가르침 당 거는 제사다 저기 다 저기를 셰바 아메키에 사자 되지 아메키에 나가지고 셰바 규를 여대 봐죠 당아주 마도 수로 셔셔 맞은 되는 아주 마 시로 제대급라 아니 이기 넘버 쉐바디 데 참모등 아주 시로시도 아니 참모 지운 거로 받아 지나당 아주 시로도 쉐바디 매번 맞춰 가르고 그러서네 되게 와치면 바도 왔어야 돼 두고 바도 왔어야지 두고 거래 지나디 데네 바도와 대한 안마 지게와처 미지리 기고요베나 다 바도와 대한 바 가로도 개와처마 대신 아주 맹알이야 아니 당보 인삼자와 나신제는 밤에기 구란이 뒤어도 디길이야 남바샤가 슈두고 디게와len 두고 그래서 안두스제는 저나 개와지길에 미지 개와래 다야딘 미두두스마 시도디 야 바도와라 삼자 데네야 개와지모 두친다 누구 그래서 제가 디네서 개와 아주 이 남바샤바디 남바샤바 참모디 마 삼다베나 대바도 누구래 되네 조선 좋아요 말했으네 되네 잘 매래 또 무디네 직 줘도 거와 제가 되네서 고 안에 디 남바샤바디 개와 치마 될래야 타균이 매등에 지도 탐에 타야 매스 매도 두 삼다도 당한 쪽이 안주다도 개와 대체 안주 키로도 안주 남바샤바디 개와 치마 바도 아주 중요도 아니 디 바도와디 개와 치마 잔다 계시질 중요도 진짜 개와 치마 중요로 봐. 저자데 개와 치마 요바디 디 두고 디니스 두고 그러지.
So that is how one establishes lives previous to this. And in fact, that consciousness is beginningless. But what about the forward progression? Well, we are where we are right now in our life. Moment by moment, our consciousness, one moment leads to the next, but eventually this life will end too. And in the moment that this life comes to an end, our subtle consciousness, in the very next moment, continues, as it has throughout this life, moment by moment. When this life ends, the very next moment is now within a new state, this time in the intermediate state, and will be there until rebirth is taken again. And let's say rebirth is going to be as a human again. Then, in the moment that a sperm fertilizes an egg, the consciousness will enter there, and the process will continue. So here too, when looking forward, we see that there is no end to consciousness either. The continuum of consciousness is both beginningless and without end.
지상 나와서 쉐바들라 릭몽고여로 원시에서다 이기 쉐바 니체 다데네게 이기 쉐바 나라야 동화다 대화다 초와 태좀나 lok다서야 되네게 쉐비 릭다 말아요 봐 지상 나주 시로지도 원시에서 가르고 매바 차르고 가르고 되네 마마지 다 저어데 니나신 초와 동화다 대화 녀에게 되서야 라과래 되서 가르고 다 마가바 수르고서 이기 넘버 쉐바 참어들이 이게 넘버 10 참어되다 개왕아마네 마디네요 데네마 치마도 쓰는 가지고 가브리엘이야 아니가지 밀리아 개발레도 미기 풍부하라 쇼시 넘버 10바체 가브리엘이야 데네 둔돌 파게도 둔돌을 룰레 넘버죠 가브리엘이야 힐릴 할이야 넘버 두스는 다 코와 세상 코와디 코로한디 이게 넘버 10 참어되 차고 제가 이게 넘버 10 참어디 데라 토메 타다 타에 토마디는 시오레 디바도 데네니엘에 이기 넘버 10 참어도 요 말에선 데네 샤샤 두고 말에 모바나 데네 마로는 이기 넘버 10데 디바도 두고레 데네 이기 넘버 매바 차그레선 데네 샤메 제가 이기 넘버 10 참어라고 해야 돼 셰바 릭 차쇼도 차쇼스데 이기 넘버 10 차쇼도 마도 셰바 차상데 말에다 왕시에 가르고 매바 쳐도 개와치마 제가 데네에서 이기 넘버 10 차쇼디 토마 타야요 말에 타메 제가 토메 타메도 이기 넘버 10 차쇼디 토마 간에 중화에서도 데네 중화에서 삼당에도 개왕아 마이 하고도 그랬어 이기 넘버 10 참어데 타마를 약간에 누구였으면 마마마마 줘도 하고요도 개와치마 여바다 하고 그래 제가 이 개와치마다 아마 예비게 줍제디 이기 넘버 10 참어디 녀랭이 규셰바지를 깨고 그래. 지사대 녀랭이 규셰바디 나마지게 지안마도 세디게 토마도 주마데데 차야 말에 제가 되는게 두고 그래. 나 삼나나로 되니시 당고에서 와.
Consciousness in general can be divided into many layers of coarseness and subtlety, or can be expressed in different classifications. Sense consciousnesses, mental consciousnesses, and amongst them, feelings and varying thoughts. many different types of consciousnesses. But what is being referred to here, when we're talking about the progression from lifetime to lifetime, is the subtlest of primary consciousnesses. And that is what is referred to in this final section of the final sentence of this paragraph, the most subtle type of consciousness. This is what remains at the time when when a particular life comes to an end, and all the varying layers of varying coarseness of consciousnesses dissolve one after the other. Then the very final, subtlest level, which is what progresses in the next moment to the next life, is what is being referred to here as the most subtle type of consciousness. And it is this that is both without a beginning and without an end. And each moment of consciousness has as its substantial cause an immediately preceding moment of consciousness.
제가 두시네 데 셰바 참모데 디니레사 다 제가 당한 저 셰바 세디 셰바 그런 간에시레스네 디지 권마 셰바 세디 사신 리비 리삼지레 리비 차삼지레사 지 숨으로와 제가 셰바 세디야 당한 저 숙세데 파치 야와치네 당한 저기 수분나바 셰바 제베이네 수디파 야와치데 다 셰바 가와르스네 셰바지 레로자 하고 토야 가고르와 자 디네 자 당한 저 셰바 세디 아주 유지 낭제데 릭잠딜라 셰바시고레체 하고 해체 디레샤 세베 디레 세베 하고 이게 유디 릭잠기 차딜라 셰바시고레체 저와
We compare the two, consciousness and form. Both can be divided into coarser and subtler levels. Form we have much more familiarity with in terms of knowing and investigating and recognizing. Consciousness, on the other hand, is much more difficult for us to recognize. What it comes down to, though, is consciousness is what merely knows.
자요도 남산 데네토나 하고 마다 너고다 미기 토나 하고 그러고 말봐 데네 바지네 지금 하고 간 셰바 지금 걸 아직 미기 톤 때는 미기 옹벌을 때네 유대 하고 간 셰바 지리고로와 진짜 디디 왕셰세디 거 建거 다견 된래된 하 진짜 파지 그 누선배 하고 릭잠디 셰바마도 아니 셴한 쪽에 디레세 셰바를 믹스기 자투에 가고도 된 바지 된 분위기 두 선배게 직 통에 거기 두 선배 삼로 줘로와 되는 중국으로 아디 디 셰바로 와다.
There's consciousness that knows. For example, that we now are all hearing sound. So this is the ear sense consciousness that is hearing, to which that knows this mere sound. And whilst we are hearing, we will not be aware of, for example, the smell consciousness, so or the nose consciousness rather. To the nose consciousness, sound cannot appear. So we tend only to be aware of our consciousnesses when they know something, when they know an object.
이상 나 주수부 날바 디와 투에다 하고야 두어 투하고야 디디 초와르시 셰바다 하고야 줘봐 디차상 디마 나 주부 날야 자망부여로 자 다자 나는 말 룽로 주거든 내가 념도 룽디당 뭐 예매비 톤에 셰바디 파 유진 하고 그래야지 데니기 바 자나는 바 룽로스다 가서 봐나 아니 델야 룽마로데 데데 셰바디 두고 마데니 딘 디와라바 차반도 초와 하고 그거 말했어야지 디송고로 와 제가 데니게 다 셰바세디 나저 룽 참모 대당 뭐 직비 직비인게 데니게 직비게 룽당 뭐 직비게 유디 네수디다 뭐 직점 직ля 아니 셰바세지 데니 뭐 송고르다.
And so too with tactile objects. Our body is covered with nerves, nerve endings, and this, together with the wind energy, leads, the wind energy, which is indivisible with consciousness, ensures that objects of touch or tactile objects are known. So therefore, consciousness is what knows.
that the Jawang Amada Chima Yuba the Sheba Diniki Dusine, some Dati Yang are Yuba do some Dane Dine. Dine that in Man Garfumusne. Dene Rangi that Yang Jawangama Yubiki, Jumsen Gilia, Dinesia Sungore, as a Bene Beju Pugiro, Beju Nada, then the bit Semjan Puri, Beju the Kid. Puji and Lamsango, Yasne, the Kosa Ami Oma Tuyadi, Jisuji Lamoja, Konkodu, and Tunshingis. Did Tunshing by the Karsene, Quenkiwanga Magi, Oma Tumbi, Kombashukimbo, but Digi Kinjin, Nipushuki, Kasore, Hakugo, Mother, the Nico Lakugo, Marco, Kiwanga Madi, could how Sujela Moja, Kotunshing by the Karsebe Lana. Yudan Kin Mebala Tunshingo Mare, she's not Yudan Kin let you go resin. Yudan Kin Karesin, Takiwanga, the Nego Mamungo Tumbi, Komshi Yobanza, the Negi, Bachagi Wangi, Tiki Tuntu residue. These are Kiwanga Yore, said himself, this Yesungore.
A further reason that is used to establish past lives is if you take, for example, a newborn calf. In the moment the calf is born, it immediately knows to turn to its mother for milk, to sustain itself. Now, there's no one who's telling the calf what to do. The calf naturally knows this. So how does it naturally know? This natural knowing must have come from somewhere. So this is a habituation from previous lives. In the previous life, the habituation from a previous life is what will have led to the behavior being natural in this life, or having this habit in this life.
That dine, on the Nima Denesa, that Jawangama Yuba that Chima do samda. Dine, ranking are Jawa Langbala, Tamebe, Sadan, the Jawa that Jawangamala, seeing us number Shiva Chamodi, Yamangamala Tameba, then on the Jawangama Lemba de Tayoma. Yawa Dilembare, the nation barima, so I made a land by this. Nakiwa Dinis Lembare, then Tonrashi Lembare, Dilla Leomare, said Dinella Mary. She's not Yawangama, Hazi Leorson, how could Tayomares Lembatle? Yawangama Langbala, Tamepe, Jidera Rangi, Sedi, Madang, Deoyo by Tishindu, Kiwo Shen Tamshedan Jehoyus. She's not that now the Sedigi Amaleki, Amateling, Hansugi. Jehoyorowas, Amalakia. On Dinashi, Takiwang Namal Hembala, Tamebasa, Takiwang Amal Mongo, the Semjan Chicks, the Kiwala, Kiwala, Denegi, Kiwanta, Semjan Chasalia, and Jawad Pamigi, Pu Pamig, Jehoyo, but the Tayomares, Zoyomares, Tamebares.
Coming to the next paragraph, and here I'll just miss out one word. Since rebirths are infinite, everyone has a relationship with yourself like that of your own mother of this lifetime. So the first clause refers back to what has just been established, that rebirths are infinite. They cannot be counted. There's no one who can say that they have had a particular number of rebirths. They are limitless because of being beginningless. And as in these lives, one has a mother, just like one does in this life. One would have had limitless mothers.
Digi garu dugorsne semjen thamje rangi maje nyowa di dugor dadi semjen thamje rangi du samda de da kyawa lembala thameba za nga semjen dili kyawa khozale kyawa le me dili kyawa le yo maresne lapthya yo mares me ba za da dine su samda de kyawa ngamal ya nga kyawa lemba de la thameba za semjen 차상자네 디자네 개와 말렘바레 타야 매래 매반자다 semjan 탐제자네 랑게 마지 용화셔다 짱자 최고 소소라 semjan 탐지가 부지 용화 짱자 최고래 디네 두 삼다데 semjan 자랑게 마지 용화래 세비기다 디네 두고래 디 삼당 고래 제래.
The way of thinking that one is developing here is one first recognizes that lifetimes thus far are beginningless and therefore infinite. And therefore, one has had infinite relationships of mother and child. And therefore, in the same way, one cannot point to a specific number of lifetimes, one cannot point to a specific number of beings with whom one has the relationship of mother and child. And therefore, it is impossible to state that there would be even one being with whom one doesn't have such a relationship. That because of beginningless lifetimes, one would have had such a relationship of mother and child with all beings.
Chisa mar sheba sido simja taja rangi ma je nyongwa di sheba sigo hakowa sigo ruwa mar sheba la di simja rangi ma imba sheba la nende ma marwa simja rangi ma marwa ma chik ma doyo ma marwa chisa ta simja taja rangi ma je nyongwa sheba sigo mar sheba sido simja taja rangi ma je nyongwa di shego hakowa kore sido chisa du samdang yudu chisa dine samdang yudu ta simja taja rangi ma je nyongwa sheda ma to ma je ma nyongwa je mindu sempeke ta hakowa chisa dine samdang ji samdang jeba jidu simja taja rangi mar sheba gomba chegore.
Maybe the clearest way to express this is the conclusion one comes to with this reflection is there is no being with whom we have not experienced this relationship of mother and child. Whilst in this life, one can recognize one specific being with whom we have that relationship, and we can intellectually understand, well, there was a previous life, so therefore there would have been two that we have experienced such a relationship with. Here we're expanding our understanding to incorporate all beings, and that they are with each and every one of every being, we have experienced this close and intimate relationship.
Du sine da jugi da simjen dem jirange marje nyongwa di hakoya la du sine nga samda jeba che ri do du sine da ji nga kya len du ngama la tangi kawani kya amani kya len ba amani kya ina amiki nin sam jama ta do din shi di nye la ne ka yo re si de sheba sine sheba chamon de ba kya ngama chi le pa ki go re dene ya kya ngama dia kya du sane kya ngama se de zo ya gyuni me tin ta me ba cha ru do was dine za dang semjen dile kya len ba re dile kya ma len ba ka ya sha mi de semjen tham je kya len ba tham je le kya len nyo ba sha da jang ja che semjen tham je rang ge ma je nyo wa de pa ma je nyo wa sha da Gabriel ba la che ba ka la ama le che ka je pa ma je nyo wa sha da ri do was che za da du sine sam da de semjen tham je rang ge mar je nyongwa se de samda de nege du jine samda jeba je sam jeba ta ganzam chigla ta ngone semjen jigyang e ma je ma nyongwa semjen jigyang mindu sembe samlo ngeba tembo ji de nege ji yonggi sa yonggo ro bada de nege yongdo da semjen da jarange mar sheba se de ligo da samlo de sam mar sheba de li hago ligo ro bada.
The meditation that is repeated or done repeatedly is to reflect that our current moments of consciousness came from a preceding moment of consciousness, and that itself came from a preceding moment, as it has throughout this particular lifetime, moment preceded by moment of consciousness, as it did throughout our period in the womb, and then from that very moment of conception, the moment before that, our continuum of consciousness was in the intermediate state, and in the intermediate state, moment by moment, our consciousness abided, but in the moment that one moved or took the form of an intermediate state being, in the preceding moment, one was in the life previous to this. And then from that moment, the final moment of the life previous to this, one can go back in terms of the continuum of consciousness, moment by moment by moment, right up to the beginning of that life. And at the beginning of that life, or of where one was born, if one was born from a womb, then within that womb, one's consciousness would have progressed moment by moment starting at the point of conception where consciousness entered from the intermediate state, and that was preceded by another life, etc. So we see this continuity of beginningless rebirth. Then we recognize in these rebirths, just like in this life, we had a mother. And there was, just like there is a mother of this life, there was a mother of our previous life and a life previous to that. And as our rebirths are beginningless, so too then are the number of beings with whom we have the relationship of mother and child. This too is beyond counting, beyond being able to state, this one I have had such a relationship with, but not that one. And not only have we had this relationship of mother and child, but certainly father and child, and so forth. So the conclusion of the meditation that one comes to is that there is not a single being anywhere in any of the realms of samsara that one can state that one does not have such a close and intimate relationship, or has never had such a close and intimate relationship. With each and every being, one has experienced this closeness, this intimacy. That is the definite conclusion that one comes to in this meditation.
Adine detabi gu dushi lo chongwa la san tomar tanyum gu dushi ngepa to kogres. Detabi dushi gu lo chongwa la san tomar tangbo tanyum gu dushi lo changores. Chisa de simje tamje dushi na samtang wala tangbo ta dine ke simje le mibi ta simje tamje la tanyum gu lo changores.
In order to train in such recognition, it is necessary first to have a mind of equanimity.
Desada digarishene ngarazugi ngarazula nyering shiwu juidirwada jigi sosugi pamada punjane dinganzo sada dene dile shen sada ane jiko dinganzugi nganzula kapde jawore sa paashi che dinganzu nyere sa che jisa denige samdaidu ane rangi nyingi tele pete kawada zewa kiele lada zhao delia njik dini ge jamje da zewa ma ke delia nebi sambaki ge jingurwa an dini njige barmaru ti zhao da dini nye ga ma kimaru chi yobe na de nangme do sha ye nangme da sha de jingurwa dini zda ngan zulia semba dini ge shushembo shu yobe za dini za da semjen tamje le jikbu jigyang daya ge samlo janggo 당님 janggo se de 차사다 니에다 바르마다 자와다 차사리아 셈 지바 다투야지 로디 장고를 해서 당님 장고를 해서 지선 디셰로한테 지선 소수기 파마다 니엘나 델레 자와키 잠바 근가와용하다 자와된 건도 자호를 스텔리아 직 미디어바체야 콘도세야다 콘줄리아 체와체야게 삼로디네 용고로 데니게 발마로 신데 기마르 데니가 메바친다 근데 곧 낭메단 거로 낭메다야데 용고로 와디네
Here the need to cultivate equanimity is being presented. Because the position we find ourselves in is we are spontaneously have a feeling of closeness to some and distance from others. And this is best understood if we divide beings into three categories. There are those that we are close to, usually our family and our friends. Then there are those that we have an adverse reaction to, those that we are distant from, and generally referred to as enemies. And then there is the mass of beings who we are largely disinterested towards. And the problem with this is that towards our loved ones, attachment arises, the feeling of closeness, wish to benefit, but towards our enemies, an aversion arises, either wish to harm or wanting, a liking when harm comes to them. And to those that we are neutral about, it's a disinterest, a largely disinterest in what happens to them. So this closeness to some and distance from others needs to be overcome through the cultivation of equanimity or impartiality.
dine zada an juge samlo di dine yungyo ba zada dine gi nyering ro chi yo ba ina dine lega ro chi jangbu ro chi semje tamje la jibu jigyang ro chi pando che ya di jamje la pando gi di yong tu me ba za ji za dang nyom de jangbu res ji za jibu jigyang ta be samlo jibu dang ya de jangbu res sa chi sung go ro ba.
When one overcomes this nearness to some and distance from others, the way one will interact with all is in a straightforward, honest manner, without any favoritism.
Dingi anzu nyere, ding anzu ge zhao re sa, di barma re sa, di desen sumdu che che, du shi ne, ane semle ya chal go re che.
The text continues. You begin by noting that within our minds we have three main categories for others: friends, enemies, and neutral beings.
Jisa dine ge sum cha yo du, dine sum la mi bi gi lo mi dawa sum gi go wa che. Deda la mi bigi dua cha, sidi da rangi nyen cha la mi bigi cha pa jie da. Dine dang sidi da zhao cho di mi bigi mi ne dang wa jie. Dine shen yal wa dor wa sidi, jisa da barma di la kon nang me chi ya wa dua she, dine ki dur bigi samba chi, lui kher so, yang mi zhao wa sum yung yus. Jisa ngan zu dine ki yu di la shen la ya du, nian da di ngan zui ngi nian re se, di ngan zui zhao re, di ngan zui nian da zhao kaya ma re se, barma sen di son sum che du, di negi lui pa samlo dang ta yin ya, nian cho la mi peki chakwa ki yung re se, zhao cho de la mi peki dangwa, kong dangwa ki re se, barma de la mi peki nang me che ya wa duwa, nang me sha sha, di samlo de, di si yung go re che re.
In the next sentence, we have three different attitudes towards them: desire, hatred, and neglecting indifference. So those who we consider friends, so friends and loved ones, whomever we consider part of our group, that we have a warm feeling towards, desire, or rather attachment, arises readily towards them. Those that we are averse to, our enemies, anger, rather than hatred, anger readily arises in relation to them. And the vast majority of beings who we have a neutral relationship with, we are largely indifferent towards, or have a neglecting indifference towards. So these are the general class of afflictions that arise in dependence on categorizing beings, on differentiating or discriminating between people or between beings.
냠뇨로 시어바라 차고로 바지소네 람기릭 야가릭 람기릭 똑베 냠네 되게 냠뇨도 충알마도 진 데네기 릭딩 아줄레 냠뇨로 침보여로 와데 가스네 다 데네기 베네가 저기 지기와 데네시도 람사 디와 록바 치고에네 람상아 섬도 오 디니엘랑아도 분기할 제월 지지제월 니리 콜 제월을 해야다 지지도 람상아 주기 년기 초를 봐 로버치에 마도 현다도 봐샤샤 자고로 봐 에네 안지양지도와 강아지 지 아주기 미몽부식 안에 아주 년도 분자로다 년로다 안데 년 마연바다 소속이 안에 배나 균에 맞아 미수미변에 다 출로를 잡지 강아지 체도 갑라 아주리아 직교배 근디버 여비 지갑라 갑라 아주 년에 소수기 스칼라수기 것은 랑기니에 분교의 파마다 지수 가와도 따지 디당보 교회 삼당 교교부로 와 아니 디젤이야 아니 데 바르마디 교회기 삼당마다 소수기 다 넘균의 소수기 자제된 강아제 되게 파타르시 디 바르마디 디 교회에서 다 데네게 차상 살선은 되는 제일이야 디수 교회에게 고호라시 바로 제사 데네에서 데네기 두 삼당의 남사 데르와다 딩아서 람사 년기 초들 봐 두고로 와지 따발레 두고 말아 지나다 부구로시 소수기 년 모신 바다 데네 부구로신데 디메메 부구로신데 년바 되네 당보 야가디 소수기 초 부구들 제야다 디메메다 교와디 산달 제야 데네 용시 버와 응고로 와 데네 Dine za tang ju gi de so yang chang ju jik se bu ra cha go ba ane ji ga ju de da de zemo mang go ji go ro ba jike phuti sia da ra ga ji mang go ji da de jik zemo de mo ta we ne dang bo gar so so ne nga ju gi ge hap ta ge hap shan da ni dur go ba ne dang bo nga sam lo de su nga ju sam lo de ga nga ju ge he mi de top na sa be sam lo di ga le go ro ba 제가 찬임리고 마팅 안주 톱나서미도 파줘디 지도 쇼나서 배삼리고 와데 예링레 살아봐 어두 신행 아주 돼서 디네 삼다베네 안지기 안디네 아주 기합 집어 나라이네 아주 소수게 가사기 초디 나데네 아주 나디기 톱나서 배삼리고 와 제가 디네 이제 아주 디 대성 아주 세보를 하고 도야지도 와 디네 이제 아주 딱딱한 예링디 디네 연구를 했어야지.
What has been presented here about dividing beings or discriminating between beings, dividing them into these categories, and then in dependence on that, varying afflictions arise. This is well known to all of us. These presentations like this in the texts, we have a lot of experience of. When the texts talk about realizations, these are a bit more theoretical for us. But this we have experience of. So we'll know how we react differently to request to help. If it's someone that we have a close and warm feeling with, we'll help with joy and readily. If it's someone we dislike, we'll look for an excuse not to do so. And if it's someone we're indifferent towards, well, we'll do so, but begrudgingly. And also, if we imagine ourselves being in a situation of grave danger, who would we elect to help? Whose life would we save? It would be the person we feel closest for. And the others, well, perhaps if there's the opportunity. But we'll be inclined to help the one first. The first that we'd help would be the one we're closest to. Or if you think of, if one needs to give gifts to children, if it's either a child you have a good relationship with, perhaps your own, or of someone who's a dear friend, one will perhaps spoil them. Whereas if it's a child of someone you don't like, you'll give them quite a different gift. And also where this is very clear is in sport. So if we take two national teams that are competing with each other, not only are we likely to support our own nation and be joyous at every success they're experiencing in the game, but if the nation we are competing with is a nation with which we have a poor relationship with or have a bad view of, we will take particular pleasure in our team's dominance, in our team's victory. And remarkably, when a sporting team wins, the supporters feel a sense of pride, a sense of achievement, when they really haven't done very much. So this we know as a truth in our own lives.
Adene samle kerso disum gena jachu sem ge misiba yinbe jesa denige nga semjel ya tangyum ma ke ba che nyering rangi ni chola chaba dan dawe chola danwa barma la ya ane chige dose yawa do namege samlo denis kiwena di samlo gena ni jachu sem ke tu ma des jesa jachu sem ke wala rangi nyen dan trawo dan barma sumgal ya chiku chikyang ta we lo ko gures tanyum ge chiku chikyang samda lo ko gures tanyum ko gure ma do dene ge tanyum me ba che dene ge samlo rangi nyi chola cha ta te chola danwa de barma ya ane ji ya wa do wa dene yunggu ba na ja ju sim ki tu ma re se je ge mi si ba re ki tu ma nam ya ki ma re che.
The final sentence, I'll just change the vocabulary again to what we're more used to. When these three attitudes are generated, it is impossible to generate bodhicitta. Therefore, it is important to neutralize attachment, anger, and indifference. So here, we are being exhorted to cultivate impartiality or equanimity, where we come to transcend this discrimination between beings, and rather value all as being equal.
dai dini ki misibes dene gare kimje garasne decha da sheda shen de la ji nyambi ge barmi gi sem nam nyombo jupki de kai che jada dini gi ni adin mala decha shedada ane 지금 발매라 도신지 지민년베게 되니까 로드 파 도르치네 발매 심전 남라 ane 지금 녀바 두고 그래 녀바 알레 녀바 두기 쳔버랭에 되데 어디 녀바 두고 그래 세다 그래서 당념 두고 해야 좀세 디레다 되네래 되네 인자다 다 되네 가루고레스네 냠린 디제발라 시제자 되네게 냠린 제발라 깨와가시 토 안나 삼노 동알라 팽유 팽기유에서 되네 삼다도 깨와가마다 지게 치미게 삼다네 되네게 냠린 제발라 팽기리 해서 돼 냠린 디 제발라 깨와가시 토 삼노 동아 디 팽기유에서
This way, the need to establish a sincere and impartial attitude is presented. And the text then continues. To do this, it helps to reflect on rebirth.
디 장랑 탐해봐이 제상한주 깨왕아마라 토마매봐인사 안주 깨와 렘바데 안주 야네 야도 야네 깨와 렘바데레 장가데레 탐해봐 말했어.
And since our rebirths are beginningless, there is no limit to their number. So this then builds on what we've looked at thus far.
제자다 깨왕아마라 깨와 렘바라 탐해봐인상 디젤에 깨와래 디젤마 저산데 저랑에 니엘라야 탐해봐 셔 되나 나다 나주 니인바 되소 깨와 데와 다다 나주 니인바 되소 깨와 나마 남다도 니인베 망해봐 당스 달체들 양아주 니 분야다 파마다 분야다 나주 니레데 깨와 나마라 기딘다 나주 니레베스네 디양 해봐요 말했어 깨와 나마라 나주 저와 인식이 해서 그러죠 나주 깨와 렘발라 타요 말에 장거요 말에 담매봐서 세디기 가서 니인바 지사 깨왕아마마 기디네 니인자야 레베스네 인빙해 봐요 말에 자와 인식이지.
And it continues here, presenting further why this needs to be reflected on. Thus, it is not definite that those who are now our friends were always our friends in our past lives. So here we're being reminded of, because of this, of the continuity of lifespans that we've had and the relationships we've had with beings over all these lives, how we are experiencing someone now is not how our relationship has always been.
세대리 양안들게 그디나 직강아 제다 자워치 뒤에 진안줄에 쏠이야 배치 쇠가 용한다 디니 지겐 집에 자워치 비네 개왕아마랑 그디나 디 자워치 예레베선 딩해 봐요 말스 개왕아마 디와랑게 파마 랑게 부고 랑게 분자 쏠 자워치 시우지 인식이 됐어 제자다 세디기 자워디게 이나 그디나 자워인비 인해 봐요 말스
And that those who are now our enemies were always enemies in our former lives. So taking these two together, again it serves to shake up how we relate to people that we interact with. Those that harm us, those that we have a poor relationship with, that may be the structure of the relationship now, the context of the relationship now, but it hasn't always been so. In our past lives, our relationships were different. And so too with those that we are close to now. Things are not so fixed. They are not so certain.
샤나양 아니 체딜에 지구라 삼다바이네 체되라 아니 체되라 소수기 자오시 체메라 소수기 년도 규바 용거레스 체되라 소수 자오시 마 체메라 아니 소수 년도 규바 용거레스 이 용거로 와네 다다가 이디메 체미세죠 미세 지부디 디게 낭 차샤낭 체되라 자다 체메라 년도 규와당스 디발도 년도 규와당스
Even in terms of this one lifetime, there are persons who early in your life were enemies, but later turned into friends.
디용으로데 세되려야 직자오 제 체메라 년도 규와디 안주기 대세부라데 베네 지게 랍드르 갑라 보단 보면 이렇게 디나 추보잡직 추보장장 잡지 징되어이나 징되어도 거기 직직을 그냥 막 가지 자오를 차려와 추보장이 잡지고로와 직직을 가고 말마 then 지로 랍드르 천저로 망고에 제려야 냠도 상서 잡자 용주와 되고 년차다로와 지산 체들을 자오고 년려야 혼주지 직 충주가려야 직직이야 독재 당자 그 강아지 집에 주 자원하지 균에 자와서다 균에 미디바로 차려와 제 지수용 권이 제게 거우차네 년지데 직직이야 세회상 가워서 받아 가와들이더라 지자 년려야 곧 년마다 곧 니가 균에 맞춰 봐지 지수 체면려야 니가 tum부자 되네 용거로 와다.
This too is something that people have a lot of experience of. Perhaps at school, two children, a boy and girl, really were not getting on very well. They were perhaps competing with each other, disliked each other, but then they grew up, they grew out of it, and they formed a warm friendship. Who knows, maybe even went on to marry.
지산 체되려야 배고군이 원년제 체면에 치수야지 내 체면이야 자고 주라 용구에서 요래서 다디 세부로와 아주 녀려야 차세자 배직 tum부슈제 단에 로하시체려 카하체네 되네고 자와진의 지식 대야지기 강아제야다 아니 지기 소소소 쳐야다 되네 수망 우구도 하대 등아 저게 지소나려야 세부가 저 냠녀여 되와데 되네 요러와다 지산데네게 체되려 니네 체면이야 자고 주라 용구에서
And others who were friends early in this life but later on became enemies. Yeah, this sadly two people also have all too much experience of, especially in the context of romantic relationships that don't work out. Someone that once, or two people that once were so close that hearing the other's voice, hearing their name would lead to delight arising. After things changed, just hearing their name or seeing them in the distance would lead to negativity or fear or apprehension arising.
제상은 저 체del인다다 디수수 섬다는 안중 원숨도 통투에 차기로 와다 소수기 안주기 파치로기 메리아 통에 소소를 냠냠여 샬라야 통투에게 다 세고 체del에 니 바제 체멜라 자워차 막 미팅 바차되 체del에 미팅 바 인발야 안지 로 제미 로 가시 제랴 안지기 년부 년차도 되네기 아니지 체del에 니 바게 디나 니 차에 되게 고 자워 줘야 되게 아니 게디나 니 바네 게디나 자워이나 대나 게디나 자워 좀 믿어 봐 가브리엘이 니도 줘와 디 체델에 삼다나 디니 교도도 와스 안디나신다 개왕아마 칠에 삼다베네 개왕아마 소수기 빼직 미튼 바 게디나 마나 게 자워로 진베네 체델에 파무 분야로 제제 빼 차삼 야진년 자도야 난 지게 야 개왕아마야 배직 파모 분야다 거우슈 제와르 지지여베네 체델이야 지 펜스 미투바지 배 축복자야 자도 내내 용어를 진짜 체델이야 안에 그 개왕아마리아 년디게 타지도 기디네 년차고 말에 개왕아마리아 자오디게 기디나 자오차고 말에 가브레 년차고 가브레 자오차고레스.
What's said here, as in several points that have been made, is they're easy to understand because they're easy to understand because they match our experience. So here, don't gloss over it, neglect it or ignore it. But take this direct experience that we have and remind ourselves of, firstly, that the relationships that we currently have, these too are not set. They are not set in the way they are. The way the relationship is now is not how it has been in the past, or certainly if we think of a many life perspective, and is not necessarily how it will be in the future either. The relationships we have with someone, whether close or distant, this is not established, it's not set, it changes. And we can, to the extent that we repeatedly remind ourselves of it, how that has been the case in this life, and therefore certainly will have been when we incorporate our relationships from past lives, then we know that relationships change and that people are not worthy of being viewed as lesser or greater.
Gansa shenshi tachidu ani zhao konar sungwa di norwa yinsi. Jizada jije da gedi na nyenre tachidu nyenre samda da jile tachidu nge zhao re samda di da jik samda ta di tata chego ma yesi.
The final sentence in the paragraph, and I've just changed a word or two. Hence there is no sense in unequivocally considering a certain person to be just a friend and another person to be categorically just an enemy. So this then summarizes what has just been stated.
Digi du samdana digi nga simjen ya tanyum gomnai ko samdang ko shi sungor da tanyum du ses du jengan ji jeba je dangbo du chen ne jeba je de kala chenye la zhawo ina cheme le zhawo chegi de sene ge zhawo chegi nian cha zhuo de je zang ye ba me nuas je zang zhawo ne ge di na zhawo chegi me ni na ge di na nian chegi me de ben dang an zu ge che de an zu ge zhawo de le gyun ne ma ga wa chi go lo wa je zang da ma ga na de ne an zu che de le zhawo je da dang an zu nian cha de ne mi di ko ji ba lo wa je zang da ko le ga wa chi go le ma ga wa chi go le 그 제대로 그 자오를 진짜 자오를 타지도 막아왔지나 다들 년차도 막아왔지 얼마도 가와진 뒤고 말아 진짜 내가 좀 다들 미가 좀 가와지고 진짜 니네 삼다도 진짜다 그 내가 매번 가브리엘 자오를 이래 가브리엘은 년차도 진짜 저상 인자 내가 저 직발하셔 자오세야 제 자오 집에 가블 나라 누구래 년 집에 가라 나라 핑거래 미치기다 그 안에 걸 다디 판바들에 판거를 예만해 버려. 딱그 누가래라고 야가래라고 그랬어. 또 삼단다 찍바라 왔다. 예, 뇌와 기버에 판 두고 그랬어. 지사디 타지등아 뇌소서 배 독자해야 돼요 말에. 타지등아 팬소서야 돼. 되니게 그 삼단에도 지사 그 미칠 삼단에 제대로라는 거 미팅 바지 체멜라 팀 바쳐도 딱그 아니 가르쳐줘. 찍바래도 왔어. 지나 디나시 삼단의 샘전 차상 개왕아마디 다들 체델이야 아니 지예이나 개왕아마디 자오용서 개 다들 체델이야 자오네 개왕아마 예인 거 지사 내 지바래도 와두 삼단의 차상다 샘전 차상 디타지도 나래 약보래 디타지는 가 독자래서 민두 스타던다라 대두 삼단 차상 지기하래 샤서데 두신 삼단에 제래 니링 다 나님 삼단하들라.
So hearing this then, one turns our mind to the need to develop an impartial attitude. And what's being presented here are some points of reflection to utilize. Primarily, that our relationships with others are not fixed. And we know this is our lived experience. There are those that we were at one point, were strangers to us. They then became very dear to us. And thereafter, we never wanted to see them again. We've seen that in this life. And we've seen that with so many relationships. And if that is the case in this one life, when we add beginningless lives to it, we see how relationships change. Now if we think of how we do relate to those in our life right now, we don't relate to them with this clear understanding. We relate to them in a way that's fixed or static. This person is dear to me. And we have this hope and expectation that they will always be so. This person I despise. I want nothing to do with them. And that relationship, or the way we relate to them, is also fixed and static to us. So we need to challenge that by reminding ourselves that that is actually not in accordance with our lived experience. And when you use the reasoning of bringing in past lives, it shakes it even further. We should not relate to others in this unequivocal or categorical way, seeing them as good or bad, friend or enemy. And another point one can include, and here utilize your own lived experience. Someone whom you used to be close to, they would treat you in a kind and gentle way. After that relation changed, they treated you in a harsh manner. But that's the same person. And you're saying, are they good or they're bad? Well, really, it was at times their behavior was of one style and at other times of another style. But they're the same person. Then we expand this over lifetimes. Someone we've been close to or disliked this entire life, in previous lives we would have had a completely different relationship with. As too with those that we are unknown to us, that we are indifferent to, that we walk past and don't notice. In other lifetimes, they were our dearest friends. So this we need to reflect on in order to cultivate a genuine and impartial attitude.
지 마가스데 타직둥에 다워서 마가빌로디 타직도 마가빌로디 바도 그래서 누바 총도 그래서 지산 타직도 아니 디치데 디네 차는데 곧마 타직도 마가베 삼로디 마누바 총도 그래서 네견라 때네 도시네 직접아 제타디 도시네 삼당 그래서 지는 디네기 तदु सिचेबा गुमजे समतांगा तो छेदेलेया समता तो संकेवा मालिया लेंबाला थोमे दिने जादु तो सिचेबा चे समता वेने दिने जिनानि ngazo samna nalaya kidin nime chikne o dadi gabriele nyenju do gabriele chaho ju de cha di taji do ngeba nyenre sa de taji do gidine nyenjanya je cha dygumedo nga daworesan gidine ko dawjanya cha do gabriele nyendu ju do pandu phaya do do 강하에 제도 phaya do do gabriele yang phaya do 강하 지기도 진짜 도 samdana 다 예링세 제화의 개발할 민도 삼백에 삼로 질리긴 서로하다 되니게 삼다데 제바지도 고 가생의 니수디 하고요도 예링게 삼로디 바도로면서 당한 저게 예링기 삼로 숙심볼이야 돼 뭐이 니수디 내상디 세부 한 먹어 왔지 아 저게 이런 지진기 돈에 예리도 숙심볼이고로와 되네자 두치네 제바지고 당보 두치네 제바지 다시 지야다 되네 삼당국에서로와
In this meditation, you'll challenge your closed and narrow mind that relates to people in a way that is not in accordance with reality. And this mind of closeness and distance is relating to people as being fixed and static. Hence our surprise when someone we dislike shows kindness to us or someone else, or someone we are close to lets us down. We need to challenge this closed and narrow mind, make our mind wider and more expansive. It's part of the many faults that come from this attitude of discrimination, where we're close to some and distant from others, is that from this, we continue to grasp at oneself as dear. Our self-cherishing attitude remains strong, wanting everything to be in accordance with our wishes, ourselves and our own needs, or the fulfillment of those, being at the center of our every motivation. This, in order to develop love and compassion, has to be abandoned.
Cetelia to China Samda, Denia, Cedige Samdan, the Jawa Chimalpa, Jawa Ngamalia, Samdan, Denisimja Tamje, and the Chiba and Ba, some little Gorwa, Benin, then Cedelia, Nimichil Samdam and Angazogi, the Yam do Duty and Misachil Samdavena, Shogelia Tubujagore, Gontalian, Tumbucha, Begocia, Yongore, Gabrielia Shogepa, Goyovale, and Gontalia, Gishi shed out on the Madet and the Anchu Tubuja, Machamba did. Nimicina, Yam do Hansel Mongoligor, what answer, Yamyon, rather, Dineza, Jizan, Kotaji do Mitumba Chavana, Gedina Mitumba Chang, Eva Yomara, Tumbushuana, Gedina Tumbuji, and Eva Mido, Jizan do Susine, Mudua, some died, the niggas, Nimichilia, some died, the Nimichili and you are do some time. The name the Cetil and the Jawan, Casa Cetu and Semelia, some time, near Casada, Divini do some time. The name sometimes those ya, sometimes the Geshe started the Jawan Amalia. Jawan Lenyon was a Gabriel Tawachi, Gabriel Ninja, those do sometimes. Then it Ni Machi, Jawa Machin, Chison Chasada, Dia Tajido, Yen Diabore said, Di Tajido Jawore said, Tajido Duksha Daddy, no Jurisha, Sampe, that Jibar Chasan, that Jibarido, Sampe, Samnodi, the late wins are the nigger some Taji Jabachin Duchin, Danium de some daddy, Duscio in Sarah.
To encourage you to meditate on impartiality in this way. Start by recalling the incidents over this life, where relationships have changed, and there'll be many. Use that as a starting point when it's looking at a distance. Then, bring in take that and apply it logically to past lives, to shake up the absolute way, unequivocal way we relate to people. And when you get a little familiar with this, then bring it into your very lived experience right now and see how, in the course of a single day, your relationships with individuals change. One may have an argument with someone you live with in the morning, and then when you return home later in the day, that's put aside, and you have a lovely evening together. So in the same way, we see how relationships change. They are not fixed. They are not static. And therefore, there is no valid basis to relate to others in absolute terms. So reflect like this, looking at your own daily life, your lived experience of right now, looking at the expanse of this life as well, and then taking these two and saying, because it is the case in this life, it certainly would have been the case in previous lives too. And therefore, those that I feel a closeness towards, there really is no valid basis to say that this is my group, this is my loved one, and others are not. And likewise with the enemies, those that one dislikes. There's no valid basis to dislike a particular group or person, and rather let go of this and come to not relate to others in this discriminatory way.
Kasanda didn't share the Gargor, Garsungor, Sindanganzuki, so that Anzulia Jamniji Yamlin Kores, Chisati Jamniji Yamlin de Jebala Dene, Nangazuki Chanshu Sem Gula Geje, and Yashi, Pendotuati, Diku Sanji Chui, New Bodies. That Chu K. Lengar Millennia, Nanzuki. In Jamzi the Kugo, Simjan Chasani, Jamzi Kugunya, Yonguenza, that Jamzi Yamin Gores, Chikasadi Sonche, Chisada, Jamzi Yamin Mena, Kuan Kario was an over Yagishu, Chinodu, Dennis Nang Samlugi, Jamzi Yagi Majobaina, Digi, and over Yagi, Digi, Bejo Lopata, Chans Chasana, Kangante Yunguas, Denisa Dangajugi. Move Yagi Jovanashi, Nang Samlutonia, Shalia, Pembe Sabat, and Jamba, the Zivi, somebody, Yanuba completed Tanguris, did the Tambaina, and Nazuki, Mova Yagi Gansova, the Chasa, Pembe Shan, Rajin Nigala, Pembigi, the Lea, Bijutan Tuguris, Chisan Gangati, Rangazi, me, Sushi, Gangati, Umare, that Jamzi made him, then over Yagi Chindu, Dangazi, me, Sushi, Gangamuli Gores, Chisandi, Umares, Ondusies, Dineza, Jamzi, Yamlin Chevala. Yamlin dang zo chue ne song begin yamlin ji da rimba de la jan ju de yun de menga dun yu ko ne du sam da je lo chong xie ta de du go de che za da yun de menga dun yu ko ne sam da wa la dang bo wang zo ge wang ma da chi ma sam dang go re sa de de shi ge wang a che sam da du su chi ne sam da na je an de ne ge sam da yi do da de ma an ji ge sim jan tham je rang ge ma je nyong wa da du ya da di ge ba la nye le ya sim jan tham je re ya rangi 타지도 년제 타지도 자오레스베 짐바디 도지파 심지하절 땅님의 대유로 고고리에스 지산다 땅님 대유로 섬레게야라야 맞아 두 섬당고레 깨와 세감 되래 년차나 매래 자오차야 통야도 매래 자오 년 세들래 년에 매래 자오 세들래 자오네 세매래 년차야 되네 통야도 와스 되네 자당 님이 지래네 가브리르 툼바 가브리르 미툼바 용도 와스 디나시다 깨왕아말라 토마 탐에 봐서 개왕아말에 갑을 자와 가벌에 년차요 대자 디네사 차사다 랑기 니바 직바르 샤마도 딩에 니 말에서 지샤해 민도 선배 차사 나 직바 삼당고래 해서 나 삼다나 땅님이 삼다나다 안도 신에들 디니게 다 조조딩 아주 단단 인보 조디다 디니게 삼당이 토네 주비에 조디 가서 잠니 제냠레 제디게 시쇼래 사실 안도 다딩 아주 가산다 드링기 that she samdai diredo adam.
To summarize what we've looked at this weekend, is first the need. We looked at the need to cultivate love and compassion. Love and compassion being the foundation upon which that has to be developed in order for bodhicitta to be generated, and the cultivation of bodhicitta is the very heart of Buddhism. Without love and compassion, the way one lives one's life is alone and with pain. The way one interacts with others is self-centered. Utilizing our skills and our talents and the material resources around us in ways that bring harm to others. But to the extent that one does develop love and compassion, all the resources at one's disposal, whether material or to do with one's own skills and talents, one will naturally, spontaneously utilize to benefit others. Thereafter, we came to look at, of the two methods for cultivating bodhicitta, we were looking in this text at the 6 cause and 1 effect method. But before one starts to cultivate the 6 causes, one establishes the foundation, and there we first became familiar with reasoning to establish reincarnation, which is required in order to cultivate the first cause, that of recognizing the close and intimate relationship with all beings. But as a very foundation for this training, one has to start on the meditation on impartiality. So I encourage you in our 2 weeks apart to engage in this meditation, to challenge our sense of closeness to some and distance towards others. Recognize this bias within us and challenge it. Challenge this unequivocal way that we relate to those that are dear to us and those that we are averse to. Reminding ourselves, whenever we are mindful of this arising, that enemies become friends, and friends become enemies. I know that from my lived experience. It has perhaps happened today. I had an argument with someone that I will later get on again with. Throughout this life, we have many such instances, and therefore we can extrapolate to previous lives as well. And in this way, challenge this discrimination, recognizing that there is no basis. There is no basis to say that some are worthy of being closer to and others are best kept at bay. Rather, we should relate to all equally, recognizing that current relationships are impermanent and will change. So this is an indispensable foundation to cultivate in order to be able to develop love and compassion. If one is partial, if one is biased, it will not be possible to develop love, compassion, and bodhicitta. So therefore I encourage you to meditate on this. And then thank you. Then we'll conclude therefore this weekend. Thank you so much.